Hey guys, Janelle here with Blakely Interior Design for our Design Dish episode number 4, and today we're going to talk about the scale. In last week's episode, we did mention all of the tools that you're going to need for your own interior design project, and one of those tools was an architectural scale. Note that I said architectural and not engineering. That's a big difference, and you definitely want an architectural scale. The reason that it's important is that it allows you to put the actual dimensions on a piece of paper as your space planning so that you know that the space that you're drawing is accurate in relation to every other dimension in that space. So that when you're drawing a wall that's 10 feet wide by 7 feet deep, that you can know that it's actually the relation of those two things is very accurate. The ratio is the same. And it becomes even more important as you begin to space plan and furniture plan so that you know that the sofa that you want to purchase looks good in relation to the size of that space. So we're going to walk through a little bit of detail on how to use a scale so that it allows you to effectively space plan on your own. So this is an architectural scale, and mine is a beautiful blue made out of metal, but they come in all different colors and materials. You can get them in plastic, in white, in black. I also have a gold one, which is really beautiful. Not real gold, obviously. That would be really valuable if it were solid gold. But at any rate, I like the metal one because you don't risk it snapping in your bag. You can drop it and not worry about it getting damaged. It's easy to clean if you're using markers. It doesn't stain it. I do have some white plastic scales that are just kind of thrown in my drawer, and those are all marked up, and they're not quite as nice, but they're nice to have as backup. So the purpose of the scale is really to take your real dimensions in your space and allow you to get it down on paper so that it matches and relates exactly from a scale perspective to exactly what's in the space. So if you have a 10-foot wall, you want to make sure that that 10 feet is measured and reflected properly on paper, and especially in relation to other things. When you're just drawing a 10-foot wall, a line on the paper saying that's 10 feet doesn't really mean much. But when you're putting other things in relation to that and you want to make sure that they are scaled properly, meaning that the size is appropriate in relation to those things, then using a scale becomes really important. So you'll see that each scale has 12 measurements on the scale as a whole. There's 3 sides to the triangle, and each side has 4 different scales. So we've got one in each corner, here and here, as well as on the other side, and the same thing for all of the different sides. The most common scale used is 1/4 inch, which is over here, and you'll notice that we have them on both sides, which means that in some cases you have to switch and flip the scale in order to use it properly. But 1/4 inch is the most commonly used for architectural drawings, which allows you to make it small enough so that you can fit an entire house on a large piece of paper, but large enough so that you can still see all of the different details within the drawing. If you're just dimensioning your bedroom, for example, you could probably use a 1/2 inch or even a 3/4 inch scale. And that would make it nice and large for you to play around with furnishings, and you could even fit that most likely onto an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So the idea here is that let's look at 3/4 inches, which is right up here near my thumb. 3/4 inch scale. You'll see that the 0 is not on the end; it's actually in a little, and there are little marks to the left side of it, and then everything else is to the right. And we're going to zoom in and show you how to read this and how to use it in your design project so that you can make sure that your drawings are scaled properly. So for this example, we're going to look at the 3/8 inch scale on our architectural scale. And what this means is that for every foot in real life, when we draw it on paper, we draw 1/3/8 of an inch dimension. So in plain terms, this distance between 0 and this first mark is 3/8 of an inch. but that represents 1 foot in real life. What you will see is that there's a lot of different measurements. There's up to 12 different scales on here, and the larger the number, the larger the piece of paper typically you can use for what you're drawing. And it also allows you to do more detail. So an elevation drawing with details for built-ins, for example, would be drawn at a much larger scale than if you were trying to draw an entire house on a piece of paper. Typically, the smaller the fraction, the smaller your drawing and piece of paper are going to be. So let's look at the 3/8 scale here. And what you'll notice is that the 0 is indented here. And on the right, you'll see small little marks, but we're gonna ignore that for now and look just to the left. And you'll see 1 mark with a 14 and then another mark with a 2. Holy cow, 14, 2, that doesn't make any sense. So let's think about, if this is 2, half of that is 1. So what this means is that these marks here, these longer marks, are actually the half marks of our 3-inch scale. So they're doing double duty, and the reason that they have a 14 and a 13 is because on the far end of the other scale is the 3/4 inch scale. So you have to look at it from a perspective of this is half of that, which is 1. Okay, so let's draw this on paper because I think it's a little bit easier to draw it in real life, and then you'll get a sense of how this works. So when you're looking at the 3/8 scale, in this case it's upside down, but you're looking at it, actually to you it's upside down, but to me it's not. We're going to draw, let's just start with something really easy. So let's draw a room that's 10 feet 7 inches by 8 feet 2 inches. Okay, so we're going to draw a line. We're going to use the 3/8 inch scale. And I'm gonna look across here and I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? So I'm going to start at the 8 and I'm gonna come all the way down to the 0 and I'm gonna say, okay, well it's 2 inches. And I'm gonna go 2 little tick marks past the 0, okay? You'll see that I taped the paper down so that the paper doesn't move. And typically you wanna use a triangle when you're doing, to make sure you have a straight edge. So then I would take my triangle to make sure I get a straight edge in your room. And you go back to the 3/8 inch. And now we want the 10 by 7, so 10 feet 7 inches. And we're going to start with 10 feet. And we're going to draw all the way down. 10 feet to the 0 mark would be 10 feet, and then you're gonna go to the 6 mark and then 1 more to 7. And that's 8 feet 2 inches by 10 feet 7 inches, okay? And you would continue, again, I like to use my triangle because then you make sure it's straight. Your lines are not wonky. And you gotta find your scale again. We're on 3/8 of an inch. I did forget to mention one of the first things that you really want to do. Go back to 8. There's the 8. That's the square. And that's the 0. We go 2 more little marks. That's 8, 2. And now we know that these are exactly the same. We don't need our triangle again. And then that's our 10 feet 7 inch room by 8 feet 2 inch room, or box, if you will. One of the first things you really want to do is you want to write the scale before you really even get started, which I should have done that first. But 3/8 of an inch equals 1 foot. Any architectural drawing that you look at will have that on there, or should have that on there. So this is upside down. Let me pull it off to show you, but this was a super basic tutorial on how to draw using the scale. But as you'll see, here, scale is down here, 3/8 of an inch equals 1/8, 10 feet 7 inches by 8 feet 2 inches, and you can see that it's marked here as well, okay? And you could also dimension those rooms, but this is really just an exercise to show you how to go through that process. So we just walked through how to draw on paper a scaled room. And another obvious way to use a scale is to take an existing drawing and measure how big a space is or how big an opening is using your scale. As I mentioned before, it's important to make sure that the drawing is scaled so that whoever's reading your drawing knows which scale to use. And this could be someone, it could be yourself, it could be someone else, but it also could be yourself. If you're referencing a drawing from a year ago, as you can see, this is well over a year ago, you're not going to remember what that is. So every drawing should have the scale indicated if it is a scaled drawing. Most people in the industry will assume if it does not have a scale that it is not a scaled drawing. So that's really important. So as you can see, this is scaled to 1/8 of an inch equals 1 foot. We're going to go to our 1/8 of an inch on our scale, and let's say we want to buy a new washer and dryer, and we'll make the assumption that this is a new construction home and the architect has given us this drawing. And we want to understand how big that laundry room is going to be so that we can buy new washer and dryer, etc. We'll just make that assumption for the time being. So let's see, how big is this wall from here to here for the washer and dryer? And it looks like there's also a slop sink in there as well. So as I mentioned before, you're going to take the interior edge of that wall and you're going to line it up with a 0. And then you're going to see and count over on the scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it looks like that is actually exactly 7 feet wide on that wall. But let's say we want to know how big is that door opening to make sure that the washer and dryer can fit in. Let's measure the door opening. So we line it up, and this is important that it's at the edge of the wall, not the door itself that's shown in the drawing. You line it up at the 0, and you'll see that it doesn't line up with anything. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. So what you do in this case is you actually drag it back to the next number. So you drag it back, it's not quite 3, so you drag it back to 2, and you'll see that it's not marked here, but on this 1/8 inch scale, it's a little bit tough to see. There's 0, that first mark is 1 foot, that second mark is 2 feet. And now the 0 is not lined up, but the 2 is lined up, which means we need to see, well, where does it line up? That's the number of inches. And you'll see that it's actually at the halfway mark, which is 6 inches. Half of a foot is 6 inches. So this door opening is exactly 2 feet, 6 inches, or 30 inches. And that will help you as you source for both furniture as well as appliances on reading your plan with a scale. So I hope you found that helpful. I know it's a little bit technical, and most of our episodes in this series are going to be a much more creative vibe than this, but this is one of those things. Interior design is left brain, right brain, and it's part technical and part creative. And so this was more of the technical end, but you'll find it really helpful when we get into the phase on space planning and furniture planning. But stay tuned for next week because we will be talking about finding your design inspiration and how to get that going.